This is North Dakota Today.
All right, stick around, everybody. Coming up on today's show, we're hearing from a celebrity historian. Sophia explains after the break.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome back into North Dakota Today. All right, history buffs, listen up. Celebrity historian Raffi Andonian is with us to talk about the importance of historical sites. Welcome.
Well, thank you. Great time to be here.
Yes, we've had you on the show before
That's
via
right.
Zoom, but now we have you in person.
Here I am in person because I was doing the event last night at the Avalon for Humanities North Dakota, doing a talk, and so here I am in person. So great time to be here and enjoying North Dakota, enjoying Fargo.
Yes, well, thank you so much for joining us, and we're happy to hear that you're enjoying Fargo. We love it here.
Yes, beautiful. It's a beautiful town. I mean, I love the historic scenery, the historic architecture, the downtown, and it ties very well to someone like me, of course, liking the historic sites and material and the environment.
Absolutely. Well, touching on historic sites, why would you say that they're so important?
Because it gives you a sense of place. Think about, here in Fargo, when I go to downtown Fargo, there's only one downtown Fargo. It has a unique architecture, unique feel. I was getting my photo done yesterday with Carrie Janusek, who does historic photos downtown on wet plates on tin. And I was doing that, and I got to go inside one of the buildings, and you could hear the floor squeak, and you're in an old school that is now an art studio. That gives you a sense of the heritage of the place. Or when I worked at the Martin Luther King home years ago in 2010, I met a group of kids who were escaped slaves from Haiti who came to MLK home when they first came to the United States because of the power of a sense of place that it gave them to a person that had died decades before they were even alive in a foreign country to them. So it gives you an idea of the way that the tangible past around us allows us to connect to our lives in a way that you wouldn't quite get if you simply read about it.
Yes, definitely. That's a remarkable story. Oh my goodness. So how would you say that we could really approach discussions about these historical sites?
Yeah, a lot of times we fight over historic sites or monuments, right? And I created a 4-question approach on how to approach these things. So the first question is, why remember? That's a question of significance. For example, the atomic bomb has been in the news lately because of the movie Oppenheimer. And you may all have different opinions on nuclear technology and energy and nuclear weapons, but we can all agree, I think, that it was significant, right? It had a big impact, whether you like it or not, in one direction or another. The second question is, what is the history to be remembered? So that, for example, when I worked at the battlefield at Gettysburg, the Battle of Gettysburg happened on July 1, 2, and 3 in 1863. We can establish basic facts of what happened before we get into the interpretation of how and why. The third question to approach these is, what does it mean to remember? So think about, for example, Mount Rushmore. Who we depict on there, how we depict them, the choices of how we then interpret them. What does it mean? Are we commemorating? Are we celebrating? Are we condemning or glorifying? These are questions you have to ask to better understand the situation in front of you. And finally, the fourth question is how to remember. So many of these places have multiple layers of stories. How do you tell these different stories? For example, the expansion west of the United States. You have both the heroic stories of the pioneers who are European descent that are going through a lot of hardship, but you also have the story, of course, of the indigenous peoples who are experiencing encroachment and loss of resources. How do you tell the stories multifaceted rather than having to choose one or another? How to remember is what that's getting at. So those 4 questions, if you walk through those, I think is a great blueprint to be able to better understand these places before we start to fight over them.
Absolutely. Well, you're an expert on this topic and really how to approach these issues. I believe you even have written some things about this.
I have. I wrote a book focused with a case study in the atomic bomb and the creation of the national park around it.
Wow.
And how we can approach the question. I get into these 4 questions in great detail, as I did yesterday in my talk with the Humanities North Dakota, but you can check out the book. It's called Creating Space for Conflicted Histories, and it is on Amazon. And when you go, you can see me treat these questions in more detail with the specific case study. I've written some other books too, all of which are a way to approach history in a way multifaceted way. Now, if I may, since we're here in North Dakota, I want to mention a couple of local sites where you can experience these and apply these questions that we're talking about. Right here nearby, just within a half hour of where we are right now, you can go to Fort Abercrombie, which is the first permanent U.S. fort that was established in what became North Dakota. And you actually had Dakota warriors that laid siege to it at some point. It is in the early 1860s, so it's a great place to talk about both sides. If you want to take a little bit of a road trip, you can go to Whitestone Hill. Whitestone Hill is a great place to go see a site that was really a massacre. We call it a battlefield that's one of the larger ones during the Plains Wars that were taking place in the 1860s. And if you want to keep going on the road trip, I would go to Fort Mandan, which is, of course, right on the trail with Lewis and Clark, and that's where Sacagawea joined the Lewis and Clark expedition. So you have these historic sites right here nearby within a half hour, or doing a little road trip to string them together that can tell a lot of the different sides of the American story that we were just talking about. Applying these questions, some of these are difficult issues like the massacre site, or having, you know, the Western expansion we were just talking about, and some of these have incredible heroic stories as well. And the state of North Dakota, by the way, recently allocated some funds to add a monument to Whitestone Hill. So this stuff is still going on. How we deal with and how we remember the past is definitely shaped by the present and affects how we see ourselves today. And identity is very much tied to it.
Yes.
And that's how historic place and history is so relevant to us today. And I encourage people to experience it and be in a forum where they can actually have these kinds of discussions, because a lot of times we lack these discussions elsewhere. But when you're there with that power of a sense of place, you have that reflection, you meet other people, you can have this discussion.
Well, that was a wonderful way of putting everything. Thank you so much for joining us, Raffi.
Yes, thank you so much.
Of course, yes. We'll be sure to check out your book, too.
Sure.
I'll be looking on Amazon after this. Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, everyone, stick around. We have your daily dose of motivation up next.